Welcome to the Messy City Podcast, where we talk with the people who design, plan, build, develop, or even just think about how to create beautiful, successful, and humane cities and towns. Let's learn from each other and create places we truly care about. Welcome back to the Messy City Podcast. This is Kevin Klinkenberg. Every once in a while, you see something new in the whole development and placemaking space that is super intriguing. And today I've got a guest who has a new company that he's building that I think is set to make a real interesting mark in the space. And so I want to welcome Bobby Fijan to the show. Bobby, great to have you.
It's great to talk to you, Kevin.
I want to talk a lot about what you're doing with American Housing Corporation. It's a really cool idea, and I've just followed a little bit from the sidelines and seen some of your posts and everything on social media. But before we do all that, how did you get into this space originally? What's your background for getting into starting a housing corporation?
Well, I've been in housing since basically my whole career. So, and that was a little bit by accident. So I got involved in housing in 2010, 2011. I graduated from Penn. My wife was still in school there. So I had to figure out something to do. And not that many people from Penn actually stay in the area. So it ended up that one of the easier things to do, or I guess a thing that happened, was I met a few other people who were also starting a real estate development company, and I ended up joining them. So that company was called Cross, and we started in the apartment space. So I think I ended up becoming attracted to it out of the idea of, like, one, I enjoyed the people I was working with, but even though my background was in finance, I think I was more just drawn to the idea of it being something very entrepreneurial, something where you could like create something where you could start things. I mean, people use the different term of like it being durable, which is certainly true, but for me, it was more of like the entrepreneurial aspect. And then probably over time, as I got good at it, and as I sort of appreciated the nuances, I think I just, you enjoy what you get good at,
Mm-hmm.
and I became good. And then I appreciated like either why things were the way they were, and then how I could make them different. So anyway, I guess I've been involved in housing now, for a decade and a half, um, in various different forms, on actual building homes as a developer, on a construction software company, and then this most recent one, which is a combination of industrial manufacturing and development too. So I know I love the industry. I love that I've been able to wear, I don't know, all the different hats there are: leasing, construction, development, software design. Like it's a pretty neat, like large all encompassing industry. And I also just enjoy that I get to see what other people do,
Yeah.
but then also have my own opinion on how we can and should like make things different.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you came at it more from like the finance background is where you started kind of working into this. And how did you kind of start to educate yourself on all the other aspects of it?
Out of necessity. So the company that we started just didn't have any money or much money at all. So when we were looking at projects, I just had to figure those out on my own. When you don't have the money to afford a zoning attorney, you have
Mm-hmm.
to treat that as precious as possible, and then just try and figure things out. So my specific training was on, like, called it the finance statistics side, but everything I ended up doing was like operationally. So I'd say like I learned underwriting by leasing apartments, but I also knew how to build things in Excel. So I think like that balance of like more intuitively knowing how things ought to work or how it ought to look in underwriting, combined with, well, even in this monthly model, it says like, there are 5 move outs and 5 move ins, right? Like that's a very different experience in real life when you have to do that, than in Excel, where it just happens,
Yeah.
uh, shifting one column over.
Yeah, you start to see the human side of it as opposed to just the number side of it. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But although the number side is important too, because
Yes,
if you can't see
absolutely.
something in
Yeah.
Excel, then you can't get credit for it,
Right.
and finance can't like enable it.
So one of the ways I first became aware of you was seeing a lot of your posting on Twitter/X, especially related to sharing floor plans. And you developed this real passion for family friendly urban floor plans. I wonder if you could talk about like why did you get so interested in that? And other than I assume probably like starting a family or having little kids, or what really prompted you to have such a or loud voice on that topic.
Certainly a lot of it was having kids of my own, right? And
Yeah.
so we had built an apartment building, and my wife and I moved in, and then we had kids, and we had three kids in that same building, and we moved around a few times, but we stayed in that one building, partly because it was near church, partly because I felt some attachment to the project, even though we didn't own it anymore. It just felt, I guess, like kinship with it because I knew how the building worked. Um, and I think what I just became very aware of, both professionally and then like as a resident in that product, was we're building very well for a very particular demographic,
Mhm.
and then not so thoughtfully for another one. So I think like floor plans are a useful way to think about like who is a building for, and it often happens, I think, subconsciously, or not with any either malice, but more just like, I'm gonna use the example, and you might know this because you've seen me write about this online, but like the typical like two-bedroom apartment floor plan now is designed with two essentially equal sized bedrooms,
Right.
which is just not a way a family would lay it out.
Right.
And again, I don't think that happens through any like intention design of like, no, we're going to build for because either we don't like families or we do like this other piece, but it just sort of naturally gets carried on in the overall current of just like build and develop efficiently, standardize, which is certainly needed at some points. But I think like the reason why I ended up becoming particularly strident on the issue was personal, and then driven by understanding what mattered and what didn't. Like no one in Excel, which is where, frankly, for better and for worse, most units are designed. Um, no one looks at things like, are the bedrooms equal sized? They just design, they see the 1,000 square feet two bedroom and they see the rent.
Right.
And so I think I flag floor plans as a way of saying, like, you might think you're designing family friendly, or people might think, they look at these sizes and say, like, oh, a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment is the same size as like a starter home from the 1960s or 1970s. And yet the space allocation is like very different. So I think that's why there. And then the other, I guess, like third one is, you develop your own sort of personas and lanes within social media. I got involved in social media because it was COVID and I was bored. And then I think the uptake kind of came because no one else was in this particular lane. And because no one else sort of occupied that lane, it was just became a useful avenue for me to keep hammering home, like, just look at these units, like, look at the way they're designed. And there's a lot of the stuff that's happening without too much thought. And so maybe people should like think about like, if we're building units this way, who is going to live there and who is it not going to be for? So I think that's the lens of how I became passionate about it, and then it has been gratifying to see other people latch on to that as well. Some both professionally, because you'll certainly find a lot of other people, whether architects or developers, who think and care a lot about floor plans too. But then also I think it's useful for a lot of people who are not practitioners to say, either they have specific ideas on how floor plans should be or shouldn't be, or they'll say, well, why is that? Like, why does every apartment you walk into the kitchen first, it should be this other way, or whatever sort of intuitions they have.
Yeah. So, I mean, some people might say, Bobby, what are you so worried about? Apartments are for single people or young people anyway. They're not for families. What's the big deal when you have a family? You're gonna move out and buy a house anyway. So why the care and concern for it?
Oh man, you're setting me up for the
That's what
all
a good
right
host
answers.
does,
I
right?
would, right, right. I mean, I would just say I I appreciate that. I appreciate that setup. I just reject that. I reject that. Like, I'd say, like, while that will be the experience for most people who will go through those different stages of going from apartments out to the suburbs, like, I don't want that to be. And like, as someone who loves cities and loves like dense areas, like, whether they're in the suburbs or whether they're in the city, like I want that product type to exist for that in between stage as much as possible. And I'd say, I think one of the saddest things is that when a couple either decides like, are we going to be open having a baby, or they find out they're pregnant, I think it's just really sad that someone like calls their parents, gets really excited, like mom and dad are having a baby, and then immediately goes looks on Zillow to move. Like, I don't think it should be that way. I think there should be more like people who have built their lives in a certain place. Like, I make the joke that's true. It's like just knowing your local grocery store, like how quickly you can do your shopping when you know where everything is. And then once you move, you always ask, like, where are the tortillas? Because they're always in a different section of each like grocery store. And that very small like thing gets magnified 100 times like all the different things we have to move. So I I'd also put my cards on the table, and that like I genuinely want cities to have more children. Like, I think that it is better for cities to have kids. I think cities become more boring when they don't have that way. I think there's a lot of disorder that's tolerated when there are fewer children. Um, you're always going to have to be somewhat street smart to living in the city. That I don't find that offensive. I think that's just like true and reasonable. And yet, I'd say you will understand how important it is to um, shovel sidewalks when you need to push a stroller in the
Yeah.
street, right? Like, or you will be more aware of like, oh wow, the elevators don't work,
Yeah.
right? Or at different stations, like again, when you have a stroller or when you're carrying, a car seat up and down.
Yeah.
So
Well,
cards on the table. I want cities to be for families, but I also just think like it's just like better,
I think it's,
even if families will eventually move.
yeah. And I think it's worth elaborating on that because, in the American context, in the typical American city, you don't have a lot of families in cities, and people don't think about the city as a place to raise their kids often. And there's complicated. There's a lot of reasons for that. It might have to do with schools. It might have to do with crime. Might have to do with the type of housing that's available. But I think from your perspective, especially now as a parent, uh, what would you describe as some of the advantages of like why would you want to live in an urban area? What do you see are the benefits that you wouldn't have in a more typical suburb?
Well, I think the easiest one to describe is for this couple, which is why I'm not trying to convince them to live in the city. It's more just like stay in a place you already have, right? Again, like one of the reasons we lived in our building for so long was because we moved into that building, again, partly because I had connection to it, but also it was 4 blocks from our church,
Mm.
right? And that was for us like a pretty like strong target community. So like for us to move would be switching churches, like switching like different friend groups. So like I think
Yeah.
the easiest reason to say is like why should families do it is because I'm not trying to get someone to move from some other place downtown. That's a heavy lift. It's more like you already live here. You already know where the happy hour specials are. You already like, again, whether it's the YMCA or it's the church or it's the park or just whatever rhythm you have, it's about staying in a place. And especially when you have that first kid, there's going to be so many things that are so disruptive and complicated anyway. I think it would be better for people to at least have the infant like where you already know how things work well. And again, there will be other
Mhm.
complicated things you have to do, whether you want to be around cousins or your parents or other things that happen later. But I think there's something good about people staying. And then also, I think there's a really big thing that happens even for people who don't have children that they believe that they could,
Mm.
in that it creates kind of like a future permanence. And I use and the example I'd use like being from Philadelphia, although we sadly don't live there anymore. Being from Philadelphia, you'd see this quite a bit of like it's a city that has a whole lot of graduate students, and that's good, and that there's a lot of people coming to learn and all of them say they have a great time. But there's a difference between people who are going to be in a city who know it's going to be for 2 years, like the Wharton MBA students, versus people who think they might be there for like indefinitely longer, which are medical residents or other kinds of graduate students. So every single person, if you were to poll like who got their MBA from Wharton, will say, love Philadelphia, had a fantastic time. And yet, because they know they're moving in 2 years to San Francisco or New York or London or elsewhere, um, they're mostly just consuming the city. And that is, again, this isn't to be judgmental. It's more just to say, like, it just puts that kind of countdown clock in your mind. So I think families being in city is good. And it's good even just to say, like, well, if we had a kid, we could stay. And then you'll just, again, I
Yeah.
think about things differently. You'll start to notice where the playgrounds are, where splash pads are located, like those kinds of different like appropriate like city infrastructure level things
Yeah.
exist.
So then, as if we go back to like the floor plan side of things, as you started looking at floor plans and really thinking deeply about it and working in the industry, what were some of the other things besides sort of the bedroom arrangement or the how the what were some of the other things that you saw that maybe other people weren't observing about like ways to make floor plans more useful for especially for young families?
I mean, I'd say the bedroom one is just like far and away like the largest, mainly in terms of where they're oriented and how many there were given the limited square footage.
Yeah.
Um, so it's bedrooms and bathrooms mostly, just because those are minimum sizes, and it's since and also once you get to bedrooms and when you're within the multifamily space, those are more regulated than they are within like the single family space. So once you have a bedroom, once you have a bathroom, it's going to be at least like 5 by 8, more like 6 by 8. So it's just a certain amount of square footage. So it's like the easiest one to look at on the floor plan is how large are the bedrooms, how equal in size are they, and does each bedroom have its own bathroom? And that's kind of how I would say you can sort of tell if a unit is designed for roommates or designed for families, is how that works. And again, clearest example is to go back and look at like the starter homes from the 50s, 60s, 70s, right, where there'll be a lot more 3 1s, 3 2s, 3 1.5s in 900, 1100 square feet. And that typology doesn't really exist. It doesn't exist in the suburbs because of other reasons, but I'd say that idea I would like to see translated more towards like that starter home environment, which apartment certainly ought to be able to be accommodating of the starter of the starter in relationship to family piece.
Yeah. I mean, I think a little bit about like the townhouse that my wife and I owned when we had our kids when they were babies, and it was a double master. It was a fairly new construction. It was probably built in '05.
Mm-hmm.
Nice unit, 2-story, double master, nice, great room arrangement. Even had a little yard and a carriage house behind. But we thought about that a lot. Like when we had our second kid, and when she was a baby, it was fine. She could sleep with us in the master bedroom. But the reality was, we looked at it and we're like, it's not going to be much longer. And like the two of them can't really share that second bedroom. And, for a family, it probably would have been better if those were two small separate bedrooms with a shared bath instead of one
Right.
pretty good sized second, extra bedroom with its own, ensuite bath. And so, yeah, we were thinking about, well, shoot, we may have to build an addition to this place if we stay here.
Those are the exact things, and in fact, like so, uh, that exact circumstances, I'd say, drives a lot of different like 2 and 3 story row home designs that we're building now, which is
Yeah.
like make those rooms be smaller. And the other part, which I think is useful, is like I think it appropriately signals in a good way, like who we're trying to design for. Like a child's bedroom, especially in a starter home configuration, does not need to be large. Um, can just be, and the other term I've used online a bit is like baby maybe, which I think
Mm.
is a really good useful space for 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 families in particular too. Of like a room that is just large enough to be like an office or a nursery, I think is a perfect way of allocating space in places where you're going to be space constrained, which is again any kind of infill market or urban market. You're really paying like per square foot like quite a bit. Like that's because the value is density, right? And so therefore, what's precious is space.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I think you can really see like the value of those kinds of extra smaller rooms. Again, even for people who don't yet have children.
Right. It's funny though. It's like a little counterintuitive to how the industry has been evolving over the years because like every house flipping show, and I watch a lot of them, they're all
Right.
about eliminating bedrooms, combining them, and doing ensuite baths, and so everything's been kind of going away from the small bedrooms that were really common historically, with separate shared baths to just a different arrangement.
Well, I mean, anyone who has kids who tries to do work at home knows you need like a room and a door in order to do anything. Like the open concept just does not work if you have children, especially like
Yeah.
little children. You need, whether it's a broom closet or something, you need a room with a door.
Yeah.
And obviously, not having to take up your entire bedroom or having to take up the entire living room is, I think, what makes a home be work from home possible or not.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the American Housing Corporation, your latest venture. So, how did you come about starting this venture? Who all's involved with it? And I assume this is just an evolution of what you were already thinking about doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously easy to say like, oh, this is where I've been going all the time. It feels like it's true, and I'd say the benefit of being an entrepreneur is that you kind of can choose those paths, but it it is it is a thing that I feel like I've been working towards for the better part of my career. Um, so I'd say back in it really started I think like in 2022 when I became very convinced, partly like through writing online and feeling more of like the disparity of this kind of this product, saying like I want to build housing for families and I want to build it in cities or in infill. I was trying to figure out the right way to do it. Some of it was like, okay, how can I make existing apartment buildings family friendlier, right? Change the existing apartment floor plans of larger scale buildings. I did some consulting on that. I did some investing in projects like that. Those didn't quite work in ways that I wanted to. And what it really came down to was like similar to the unit you mentioned, or what I reference a lot now, is like within the Northeast, like I think the 2 and 3 story row home is a really, really good typology for it. So I became like convinced of that piece about one, what I liked about Philadelphia, what I liked about neighborhoods in DC and Boston and New York was this typology. Again, it was built for the working class, built for working class families, like, 150 years ago, and has somewhat fallen out today, at least built at high quality. And so that was, I think, kind of percolating over a couple of years. And then 2 years ago was when I think when things really kicked off, when I met my partner, Riley, who is in space and is a mechanical engineer, but built things in space and then worked for SpaceX.
Hmm.
And then he had a passion on like he wanted to change home building into making it more as an industrial manufacturing endeavor to increase like both output and quality and things like that. So as he and I were just sharing different ideas as we navigated around sort of startup space, we both found that we had a shared interest in the overall product, a shared, I think, like understanding of why some of the different like prefab panelized companies who'd come before us like hadn't succeeded, and it just so happens that we got along quite well. And then Will and Harris joined the team too, who are also our co-founders, and I think like between the four of us we're able to, and this was about um, yeah, nearly 2 years ago now, kick the company off and say like, all right, let's try and see if we can innovate new construction methods around this particular typology. Knowing that like there are some things that make this particularly challenging as a real estate investment vehicle, and so knowing also that we needed to do something that that worked, something that sold. So I think like the stars definitely aligned both by coincidence and by intention, but we've been able to build a first factory and build our first homes. The team's about 12 now, and we're making some really good progress on building high quality attached non-combustible like masonry row homes,
Mm-hmm.
that we can build in infill markets of various types, both cities and other places where it makes sense to add density, in some more suburban type locations.
So you're really focusing on the row house type almost exclusively. And can you talk a bit about, have you developed like a model or two or three variations or different models for what you would build?
Um, so technically, like the thing that we are building that's standardizing are components, right? And the components can go into different sizes. Now, so there's one way which I could describe it truthfully, and that we can die like we can build any size by intention, um, in this 2 to 3 story like typology. Um, where that's, I'd say, like the truest is that within this typology you actually have a fairly narrow way in which you're going to build, right? Like you're not going to build narrower than 14 feet, you're not going to build that much wider than 20 feet, even if you do like a garage inside. And also, since they're attached, they're not going to be too deep, or else you would run into too much like um, non-windowed space. So within that typology, it's actually fairly limited. And so I'd say within that, we can do basically any size on purpose, excuse me, because in places, and again, we're trying to build in cities or places where there is like high demand but high construction costs. Um, uh, you are going to have again a fairly limited like set of types, but you will have to respond to that appropriately. Like these are high land value areas, and so you are going to practically need to build to whatever it is the local zoning allows you to maximize out at, whether it's set by building height and setbacks or whether it's set by floor area ratio.
Mhm.
So I'd say we will eventually, through our components, be able to build more infill mid-rise type product without changing anything in the way our factory works. But in the short and medium term, I don't expect us to build anything other than row homes, partly because I think it's just a really nice product. Not that many people are doing it. And it's a very good system for getting, for a technology company, very short feedback loops,
Mhm.
right? Like if we were to do a building that would take, 12 to 18 months, even if we're like increasing the construction time a lot. Whereas our row homes, we can put up, multiple per month and change things as we see that there could be optimizations like between individual homes. And so that just lends itself really well towards some levels of standardization while also learning things quickly.
Is there like a sweet spot in terms of the size that you're looking for the different row homes?
The way I would describe it is probably between 1,200 and 1,800 square feet, 2 to 3 stories.
Hmm.
I think that's what we're going to do, and that's partly because in those areas, that's where we'll end up getting capped out at, right? Like where the value per square foot is going to be high. Like I do want to try and make things like relatively affordable, and the way to do that in our approach is going to be by driving efficiency of overall size of the floor plan. So I think that that'll be the way that we'll achieve, relative affordability. Is like how can I give something that's really nice within the smaller space, so I can still be
Yeah.
profitable, and yet someone still feels like that they can at least raise their family there for a period of time.
Yeah.
Um, and then the last other thing I'd say, like our our design focus is around couples who are from the time where they are thinking about like being open to having kids, like going off birth control, getting married, those types of things, up to the point where their kids are school age.
Hmm.
And that isn't because like I don't want kids to stay in the city and go to school. I would like that, but more just that school is such a large determining factor
Yeah.
of where people live once they're that age, that I know we can deliver an amazing experience for that 8-year period. And then after that, it'll be more dependent on factors outside of our control as real estate developers.
So then are you kind of leaning into the ideas of like maybe a smaller unit, like a 12 or 1400 square foot unit that has 3 bedrooms to it? Something like that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Right. So I mean, at the 1,600 square foot, like it would be 4 bedrooms. So
Okay.
we're doing like 2+ in the smaller, 2+3. But once we get over, I mean, even at the 1,200 square foot, like we're having there would be a baby maybe room there too.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any concept we've looked at yet which only has 2 rooms, two yeah 2 bedrooms. One might be quite small, but it's to at least have the third. And again, that's because whether it's just a couple or whether it's a couple with a baby, I think like having that room where you could baby maybe where you could say like, all right, well, if we come back from the hospital, this is where the baby can go. I think like yeah, I think you need to have that room, and at least that's what we're going to bet on. We're going to bet on like that. There's people who desire to have a room where they can put the bassinet.
Sure. Yeah. So I want to talk about the construction approach as well, because you're doing a factory built or factory assembled approach. I'd like to hear more about what you're thinking about there. And I say as context, like for the entirety of my career, like factory built homes have been like just around the corner, and it seems like it's been that way forever. And there's been just lots and lots of obstacles that people have encountered to actually making that happen, at least at scale. I would say there have been great examples on a small scale, but tell me about your thinking internally about how you actually produce these homes, and where are you in that process?
So we have our first factory. We're about to move into our second. So we're about 40,000 square feet now, and as of the summer, we'll be in 275,000 square feet. So we're expanding. in order to expand manufacturing capabilities. I would say that everything flows from the rock solid belief that like we will be vertically integrated as a company. I think where
Hmm.
other people have stumbled is like they are trying to design the factory around pleasing local developers as much as possible, whether that's like a very large scale developer like a Lennar, D.R. Horton, or Trammell Crow, or people like that, or it's just the different local regional folks. Like when you need to design things in order to be able to build lots of different floor plan types, then it's just hard, I think, to tune that in, the industrial optimization. So for us, we're going to say, like, look, let's try and build within this catalog like, some limitations of components, and say like our floor plans will all need to look like this, and then we can drive the cost and quality appropriately. So I'd say like one is the vertical integration, and the second one is because we're focused on urban infill or suburban infill, again, in places where there's high demand but high construction costs. That means that we can um, filter for places where I'd say our construction, we will be cheaper than some construction costs in some places. I think that where there have been mistakes before in going after either prefab or modular, it's that when you try and build within the greenfield like typology,
Yeah.
which can be alluring because it's such a large market. I think people don't have an appreciation for how inexpensive apartment developers or home builders can be
Yeah.
at those cost efficiencies.
Hmm.
Whereas within the infill, people don't do that one at scale, whether on the subcontractor level or on the developer level. So it's an incredibly hard problem.
Hmm.
I guess I don't want to try and like do that, but at least like there's a blue ocean on that is a technology problem then that we could solve. So can we build like infill at like a certain cost level where things make sense as a real estate investment? Well, that's what I think we've solved on our first few projects. Um, how we scale them up, how we find those different markets and execute on that is will be incredibly challenging to do. But I think we have that like um, clear line of sight of if we can solve this problem well, then we have like enough demand within it to make that work. So I guess I think that's how I think that's how we can solve that on the real estate angle, and on the engineering one, it's just an incredible challenge. So we're using a composite product. We're not using any wood. We're using like some steel, but the whole philosophy is similar to other groups that have come before of like reducing labor hours on site by building the panels in the factory and then using a crane to put together the Lego pieces. So we're shipping things in shipping containers. We're using, I think the slight difference is that we're using high cube open top containers, and that's so we can get a little more height. So like our floor to floor finished ceiling is like 9 feet, which I think you need to have or something close to that in any product
Yeah.
that's high demand.
Hmm.
So I think there's a few different choices that we've made all around. The, I'd say the product, and then fine tuning our factory towards building that one really well. Other people have gone after either ADUs or high end spec homes or some customized homes of other things, or they focused on wall assemblies or other stuff. Like we're focused on, again, this particular type means that we can drill in this one, again, cost effectively for some places.
Right. So, building your own factory is a big swing.
Yeah,
What was
yeah,
that
yeah, it
process
is.
like? It must have been for raising money and everything else to be able to get to that point.
Well, we're not just building our own factory. I would say like most of the machines that we've built have been like custom to, and
Mm.
I'd say that's a part that I am involved in, and that I am making sure that like that our machines can produce the parts that will build the homes that like will in fact sell. But that's where and it's been exciting to be on a team of other engineers, right? Like who are again coming from space, coming from automotive, coming from defense, who are
Hmm.
trying to design things from first principles and like how do we build this stuff really well. So I'd say like um, it's been a whirlwind of like incredibly long hours. It's a very ultra hardcore kind of like work environment, um, and it's very motivated by the fact that like we all think it's an important problem, but also think it's like a fun problem of like if we could solve this, this would be
Hmm.
really cool, and would be I think, transformative in a good way, both in terms of, I think, we'd build a large company. And then this is one thing I think we implicitly believed before, or I think have always believed, and yet I've been coming to, like, I think, express it better too, is that I think that there is a way in which we have the opportunity to change positively the way that people build homes and make it be a more uh, dignified and scalable and like good career for the people who built them. You know, a guy carrying, sheetrock on his back, like, into his like 40s or 50s is like a hard way to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, like, we can do that and help people still build homes with better wages, better careers, like using, again, like automotive manufacturing methods. So we can do that. I'm excited to bring that kind of, I think, like positive um, innovation to the workforce, um, and add jobs and both add output uh, to the housing production capabilities of the country.
Yeah. So what markets are you looking at least initially with your first projects? Where are you working, and what are you trying to look for?
So our factory is based here in Austin, and that's partly because, like, that's where you can attract, like, the right kind of engineering talent.
Mm.
We will do some projects here. Um, we're buying some land in other markets. Um, don't want to go into too much details on that for one reason that I'll explain later. But I would say, in general, the markets where we're looking to build are going to be ones where demand is high and product isn't getting built because the construction costs are high. So our innovation allows us to lower those construction costs and get those projects built. And construction costs are high primarily in two different types of markets. One's where the high cost of living raises like labor costs, which raises like construction costs, and other ones where there just is lack of housing in general, and so there's just lack of labor. So those two general markets are coastal cities and mountain towns. So those are the two places I'd say, like, where you'll build first. And then second, to kind of come back to the issue on, I guess, why I'm being like slightly coy about the specific markets is, um, some of it is, don't want to, want to under promise, over deliver.
Yeah,
But the other one, a little bit has to do with, I'd say, some different piece of either factory built or modular biases within the product. Is, I would say that, and for people who, we're happy to give tours to anyone who wants to come by and see, like, the prototype and products we're building here. But I think, like, the mark of a really good house, is factory built or otherwise, is going to be people just walk in and say, like, I like this house. And that is in fact how people, like, buy them. They see a house, like,
yeah.
on Zillow, or they walk by it and say, like, I like that house. I can afford that house. I like this neighborhood. And then they buy it. So I don't think that we necessarily want to brand any one of our homes as either the American Housing Corporation or factory built or panelized. Some of it being that there's these different preconceived notions of quality, either high or low, that go along with it. And really, like, the thing that ought to just speak for itself is it's just nice. And so I would hope that people who buy our homes, maybe they're aware of the way they're built, but I would hope that's not like a reason they do it.
Yeah.
Frankly, because if they do, that's a pretty shallow market. I'm sure there'll be some people who will be jazzed by, like, the novelty and the technology and things like that, but that's a very, very, very small portion of the reason of why people buy homes. And if they do it, it's probably not why they're going to buy a primary home. So anyway, for that reason, I would say, like, we're a little bit coy on where they're going to be built. But the general markets are going to be coastal cities, mountain towns, infill locations, both within those types of cities.
So do you see then? I know this is thinking off in the future a little bit, but do you see, like, establishing ultimately factories in those other markets, so it's shipping and delivery is shorter for that sort of thing?
Possibly, possibly. I think, like, the value of us designing things to fit inside shipping containers, and anyone who spent any amount of time on social media knows that there's a prodigious debate on whether or not the United States should have high-speed passenger rail. I think what goes a little bit less remarked on is that the United States has extremely good industrial and freight rail.
That's right.
And so we have designed everything to fit inside things that move inexpensively over long distances
Hmm.
on freight rail. And so I'd say that the impetus to put factories near where we're going to build is going to be more driven by, frankly, I'd say like political considerations than it is on factory ones.
Yeah,
So we can expand the size of our factories and ship relatively inexpensively from here to other parts of the coast. But there will be practical realities, and that like I have no doubt that like we will end up putting some near the different major metros
sure.
in order to in order to accommodate like that labor force. Um, so
So do you see yourself, see yourself as the land developer too? Do you want to, when you look to other markets, are you trying to buy the land to do the development, the ground up development, or are you looking at all to partner with other existing landowners or developers?
I'd say we are partnering with existing landowners. I'd say that whether we partner with them or whether we buy the land from them is kind of the same. It's more that what we need to have control over is like the product, right? Like I don't want to be selling the kits to other people who then say like I like this, but can I have B but with like some sprinkles on top. It's like we build these sorts of things real, not like, the Model T any color as long as it's black, not that kind of rigidity, but more of like we can build things with these components and we can build these pieces really well, so we need to have control of the product. So for that reason, I'd say that we will have control over the product, whether it's a JV or whether it's us buying the land. But we do not, as of yet, have any innovation that's, call it like on the site work piece or on the land development piece. So I say our go to market is going to be that we are going to be buying, call it either pre-entitled lots or lots that are close to entitlements. Given that, like, were we to buy raw land in San Francisco, like, although we could go faster, we would do 4.5 years instead of 4 years because it's still
Yeah,
the however many like years of like of pre-development. So I would rather say like I think we can get to market quickly this really good product where there is demand and other people have either close to entitlements or in areas where they're a little bit simpler. That's I think where we'll probably end up focusing in the short to medium term.
yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, ideally a finished lot situation, if
That
you
would be
can find
ideal.
them,
That would be ideal.
if you can get them.
Yeah, and I think
Hard to do an infill
yeah,
sometimes, but I agree.
it is where I think there's useful is again it by intention choosing this site. Like every city has 3-story row homes as an approved type. Now they may not allow them everywhere, but they are allowed in different places. So like
Yeah,
if you were to see like infill, like it's a generally like common thing to do. People don't build them as much either because they're too expensive to build or because or for a variety of different reasons. But we're not trying to do some like completely new typology.
right.
It's very standard. It's very American. There's plenty of demand for it. Although, like, I would like to be able to build things like maybe a single stair building later. It isn't something that requires either new regulation or uncertainty on what the uptake is on demand. If I can build something really nice, um, people will buy it.
Yeah. Uh, so before we wrap up, one thing I'm curious about, have you all gained inspiration from previous efforts to do sort of mass home building? Like obviously the Sears houses at the turn of the century were very, very famous, the turn of the 20th century. And there have
Yeah.
been other efforts too, some other, more manufactured housing but designed really nicely in different parts of the country. I wonder how much have you thought about that?
So I'd say when Riley and I knew that we were going to work together was like probably like the first time we got coffee, and we both realized that we liked the same developer, and that's Joseph Eichler. Again,
Yes.
mass production like that really well, and it was of a different system, designed things that were cost effective and yet really nice. So the post and beam like enables like the glass, and the small bedrooms pulled towards the front with like the smaller windows enables like that whole living to be oriented around a relatively small like tract home community. So I'd say like once we both realized like wait, we both like the same coffee table book, as I think was kind of that moment of like how could we do this for other housing types, in particular how could we do this for missing middle. So I and then I'd say the other one that I take inspiration from, I mean Riley too, is I'd say like the very is how common I'd say like the uh, not from the panelized perspective, but just from like the from like again like Georgetown in D.C. or South Philadelphia or Brooklyn, like how
Yeah.
similar that is and how nice similar works again like for the working class. That's I'd say that's kind of the urbanism like thing we're inspired by.
Hmm.
And then again, Joseph Eichel, just because the homes just work really well. Again, there are problems that have come up later and different things like that, but like still like the floor plans themselves are done really well. And
Hmm.
and the detail they put into them was just uh, they're great homes. They're
Yeah.
great homes.
Yeah.
Um, so that is who we would shill for Joseph Eichler. I'd say like a lot.
That's great. So when should we expect to hear more news from you about major new announcements? Or you've got a prototype, I think, that's built right now that people can
That's right.
see. Is that right? What about
That's right.
like a first other project coming out of the ground?
So we're in pre-development on a few projects now. I'd say like our first homes, God willing, will be sold and lived in by families by the end of the year.
Oh,
So
great.
probably like hopefully more in like fall to winter, but that's I'd say like they're already going forward. Some will be in Austin, others will be in a different market. Um, but we should have people living in homes that we've built this year.
I should have asked before. So what do you think? What's the time to market like once you have a site for this process?
Um, so I'd say everything up to like the foundation, like again, we're not different yet.
Right.
Maybe that kind of innovation comes later, but for us, like our construction timeline on on demo and grading and stem wall is all going to be the same.
Right.
um, the construction erection time is significantly faster. So like our prototype house went up in about 3 weeks,
Wow.
and I'd say the third floor went up faster than the first floor. So we can already, I'd say, do multiple row homes per month finished. So I'd say like it'll be a month from when it starts, just because there's still going to need to be flooring that's done on site, and paint, and then facade. But we will be able, since the crews can move around between erection, it should be about 4 to 6 units per month that an individual crew can do. So I'd say call it a month to like finish out the house entirely.
Wow.
Um, is the time that we should do, which should help again, which is one of the reasons why we're going after, or one of the reasons why we see value in us building in mountain town markets, just because the construction windows are quite narrow,
Yeah.
and so
Indeed.
we should be able to hit those and deliver a lot more product there very quickly.
That's great. Bobby, for anybody wanting to know more or follow you, what do you suggest?
Well, our website is americanhousing.com. And if you want to get in touch with me, my email is just bobby@americanhousing.com, or you can shoot me a DM on Twitter.
That's great. Well, I look forward to seeing more stuff come out of the ground or on top of the ground, so to as it
That's
may
right.
happen, and seeing how this product looks, and hopefully someday be able to touch something in reality to see what it's like. So,
Love to host you anytime.
all right. Well,
Love to
thanks,
show you.
Bobby. I really appreciate the time, and best of luck to you and everybody with what you're doing. It's pretty inspirational. So glad that you guys are taking a shot at it.
Thanks, Kevin. This is great.
Take care.
Bye.